really nice to be in the same country.
It is, absolutely.
Again,
it's been
after
a long time.
Some few weeks on the road. I think my tan's better than yours. I'll do that. Coming up, another big move by Kelly Clark at GroupM as he merges two of his big global media networks. Hello and welcome to IDCOM's Media Snack, episode 80. So it's nice to be back.
Yes, it is nice to be back. Been a long time.
Good to be in the same country for a bit. So today, we're looking at, we will come on and talk about the significant changes that have been going on at GroupM, really interesting.
And we continue our countdown to the A&A anniversary shortly. Yep. And we're going to look at trading in particular and see how that's evolved or changed in the last year.
Yeah, media trading. And that's going to cause us to, or give us the opportunity to think about some other pitches that have been going on as well. All coming up in Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich. Okay. I think this is going to be, there's a lot to kind of cover in this episode, so let's just crack straight on. This is a continuing countdown towards the anniversary, which is going to be next week, of the ANA's Media Transparency Report, so 1 year on. So if you followed the previous episodes, you'll know that we're looking at some key areas where we think there's been significant development or change over the last 12 months. We've looked at transparency, we've looked at talent, we've looked at other areas. Today is media trading.
Yeah, it is.
So we're going to look at the impact on media buying, and particularly looking at the big network agencies and their kind of buying scope, and how that's perhaps evolved. So what the ANA report did, a lot of it was about media buying, right? Because it was really focused on clarifying whether the US was a rebate market.
Yes, that's right.
Which is going to be a trading practice where buyers of media might be paid incentives by sellers of media to make certain buying decisions. Yeah, right. And so what's changed? So in the last kind of 12 months, there's obviously been a lot of scrutiny and attention drawn to that. What have we seen?
Well, I mean, we can really only talk about the projects we've been working on with kind of our clients, and putting aside the obligation to be more diligent around kind of contractual practices. Yeah. From a trading perspective, I think what we've seen is the requirement for certainly improved pricing, but not at risking the quality of the media. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the two key principles by which a lot of advertisers are now going into the marketplace is, decent competitive trading position, number one, at a strong level of quality. Yeah. But those prices have to be sustainable. Yeah. Okay, so I think there is no longer that requirement to jump over a cliff when it looks to kind of media pricing. Yeah,
which we'd observed in previous years, this kind of race to the bottom on costs. So even the best pitches were just still being, or could go on a go off track at the end, where you just ask agencies to kind of underbid, and that was really bad practice we were seeing, particularly driven by this kind of e-auction technology.
Absolutely.
So it's still happening. We've referenced some, I think, earlier in the year where we thought they were kind of very e-auction driven pitches. But in our experience, more advertisers thinking about the effectiveness of media, and not just lowering pricing,
and which is good progress. And having a greater balance on the strategic impact of media in alignment with good, competitive, healthy, sustainable pricing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's been good progress on that. I think the ANA, again, the report can take a lot of credit for that, because it's instructed marketing and procurement, made it very clear for them the questions that they need to be asking of their agencies. And we've seen really good behaviours perhaps impacted by the guidelines that came out from that.
And we've talked about it before, but the biggest significance, and I think the biggest value of the ANA report, is that it raised media higher on the corporate agenda. Yeah. So more very senior leaders, business leaders, are now taking a greater interest in media and making sure that perhaps tendering processes are done in a slightly better, stronger way.
Yeah. So having said all of that, we were still saddened a little bit to see. I mean, bear in mind this is just a news report, but of a pitch that's concluded in the US, which actually, let's have a look at the headline here, because this is quite a phenomenal headline in Adweek. it says, to cut costs, Sprint, the mobile provider in the US, picks agency Horizon to handle its media business. And it's a pretty brutal kind of write-up of the pitch that Sprint have run. It's a $700 million piece of business. And according to the article, was really largely driven by cost, to the point where it actually says that Horizon really were the only agency left standing able to deliver on Sprint's savings demands.
And in fairness, Horizon have kind of challenged that and said that, actually the decision was made strategically and that they were able to illustrate the value that they could add.
And they're a good agency, and I'm sure they did that. And so it's no reflection necessarily of Horizon's capabilities. This is, much, if true from the client side, it suggests a pitch which really has been perhaps designed to be a race to the bottom with an objective. And this is a company, Sprint, carrying billion dollar debts. So this is perhaps behaviours that we might have seen a few years ago, which is companies seeing media as an opportunity to save costs.
Yeah, and that will never change. I mean, media is still one of the largest ticket items within an organisation, and if a business is doing less well, or if a business is perhaps positioning itself for acquisition and want to make its bottom line look better, they will go to the source of the greatest possible opportunity. Now that's kind of fine, and that will continue to happen. What I think will happen more and more is that conversation will be far more open and transparent with the agencies. So rather than perhaps hiding the fact that this is going to be a cost-driven exercise and packaging it up in a nice kind of strategic way, the conversations that will take place is, look, this is what I need, okay, and let's go into a long-term relationship where ultimately everything will balance itself out, but I need a little bit of help at the moment.
So perhaps Sprint deserve a bit of credit if they've been very upfront to say, listen, we've got this massive hole in the business. Media is a massive investment. It's a $700 million investment. We need your help to save money, to appease our shareholders or help fund a merger or acquisition or whatever it is. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they're more upfront about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they could help each other. Who knows? Let's hope so.
But that flows nicely. We noted, I think, in a previous episode, only a few weeks ago, that on all the Q1 earnings calls, which are fascinating, we'll come on to talk about those a bit more later in this episode. One of all the holding companies, this is, at the end of March, there's a series of calls and they all kind of speak to the analysts and investors. One of the notable quotes that Sir Martin Sorrell, the CEO of WPP, had mentioned was he raised his concern that his competition, so other agencies, were acting, I think he said they're irresponsibly or recklessly by agreeing to these heavy commercial demands, and he was suggesting that that's going to create a nasty kind of legacy for the industry, and et cetera, and I think at the time we talked about Volkswagen. If this is really cost driven, maybe this is another one which hopefully on principle WPP didn't participate in that. And in Q1, the agencies at the same time were posting pretty poor results across the board.
For the first time ever, right?
For the first time ever. And if you watched last week's episode, I was in San Diego, as you know, attending the ANA's big marketing procurement conference. One of the speakers there, who's been a guest on the show, Brian Weiser, who's an analyst at Pivotal, and really the kind of the voice of Wall Street perspective on the sector, made this amazing presentation. It was last thing on the agenda, so there was not enough people there to see it, sadly, but really, really interesting. And his thoughts on the Q1 earnings results, because Wall Street have obviously paid close attention to these things, and that's something that he highlighted, was that the growth in organic revenue is the slowest it's been. It's now 1.7%, down from over 4% like in recent years. And also if you just look at the US specifically, the agencies in the US specifically, they showed negative growth in Q1 for the first time ever, collectively. Okay, so he thinks this is obviously concerning for investors in the sector, which is why he's looking at it so closely. But I think what he was implying was, or perhaps the question he was asking the delegates, the marketing procurement community, was, is this downturn in the fortunes of agencies, particularly in the US, where these companies shrank for the first time ever.
All of them, right? I mean, that's
collectively, at different levels. But I mean, as a sector, those 6 shrank. Never happened before. Is that in any way related to the activities of the ANA, increased scrutiny, as you said, like involvement and senior stakeholders looking at media, pressure on terms of business we talked about last week,
and also the consultants coming into the business, right? I mean, we talked about
taking away scope.
So Accenture Interactive now being the 5th largest communications network group in terms of revenue, and knocking Havas out of. So I mean, this is a hugely competitive marketplace, and they're all fighting for a kind of shrinking pool of businesses. Asking for more competitive.
So exactly, and so these, and then you've got advertisers maybe asking for kind of improved terms at the same time, and splitting up scope, as you say. So Brian was kind of floating those things out there, asking, are these some of the drivers of this now downturn in the market? And the evidence is pretty compelling. The reason that we talk about that is because it segues very nicely into news from yesterday. That GroupM are talking about merging 2 big networks. So if Brian and others, ourselves included, had questioned whether there was a question how agency groups would find that profit growth in the future, or even that revenue growth in the future, and maintain the profitability, which they're highly profitable parts of their groups, how was that going to come about? And we got a bit of a glimpse into that yesterday.
I mean, this is just a brilliant, fascinating story. So Kelly Clark, new CEO of GroupM, has decided that he's going to merge 2 of his networks. So MEC and Maxus are going to be merged. Okay, so as of January the 1st, 2018, there will be 3 key networks. So Mindshare, Mediacom, and then still to be named 3rd network. But what interestingly he's going to do is he's going to invest significantly in Essence. So Essence is a very highly credible digital agency bought by GroupM, I think in 2015. It's Google's agency, so Google was their founding client. So famous for that, and so he understands Google's tech stack, and it's a brilliant operation. But it only delivers in digital. So this new investment will allow or equip Essence to go and buy offline. It will have greater network capabilities. They're going to open more offices. It's going to have greater talent, I think, brought into the business. And it indicates to me that GroupM see the Essence model as the future.
And that will be the new kind of fourth part of GroupM. Right. So I think that there's, it makes a lot of sense. There's a good logic there, and in the reporting so far, and the interviews that Kelly's given, and also Tim Castry, who's the current MEC global CEO, will now lead this new agency. They've acknowledged that there will be operational efficiency, so cost control from merging these 2, perhaps duplicating agencies, and that the savings that come from that is what's going to perhaps fuel and power the investment in Essence to develop, I think, what's going to be a really interesting proposition. We'd spoken about GroupM's M platform, which is their kind of audience and data platform, which I had a chance to see in New York a few weeks ago, which is a very impressive proposition. I think when you put these new agency entities on top, it's a powerful and differentiated positioning in the market.
It's a really, really good play, and I think that they will nurture the Essence proposition and build it out, and I think it's going to be a hugely appealing proposition to many clients.
So we'll bring it back to trading. And the reason that we think this is all relevant to trading, because when you merge two agencies, I mean, MEC is a big operation, right? It's $1 billion revenue business, and Maxus is about half the size, I think, both in terms of network and in terms of headcount, in terms of revenue. But you put them together, they suddenly become, this merged operation is the third largest media network in the world. So it leapfrogs Mindshare and Mediacom in the kind of GroupM in terms of scale. But it prompts a really interesting question. Is scale important now in media buying?
I think to some advertisers it probably is. I mean, GroupM from a trading perspective always go in at GroupM. So whether you're, irrespective of which network you're operating with, it is generally
they aggregate
buying, and it is fueled by the power of kind of GroupM. But I think certainly for the time being, scale is still important, especially for the smaller advertisers. Yeah. For those big, significant advertisers, perhaps less so. But for the time being, it still is, and it's still a powerful story. It's still a powerful pitch to prospective clients and advertisers. I mean, GroupM are very eloquent and articulate about the power of scale, not just from a trading perspective, but in their ability to secure smart insights from kind of other media owners and partners that can kind of fuel strategic kind of data-based thinking. So they play on that a lot, and I think it resonates for the time being.
Yeah. I think we've spoken before about our expectations that just the way media is bought obviously is going to change, not just in becoming more automated and optimized through programmatic techniques, but also advertisers perhaps getting access more to self-serve technologies or being able to take more control of buying decisions. And there's been lots of talk about in-housing of buying capabilities, those kind of things. So that just the function of media buying is changing. And we can see a difference, bringing to these two essentially service companies, because as you say, they're separate from the scale buying, together kind of simplifies that model. GroupM will still remain a very large buyer of media, but that model is going to change. Has it all been created by the ANA's transparency report? No, not necessarily, but I think it's really tempting, as Brian Weezer was also saying, to start to say, this was a catalyst for change. As Kelly Clark is proving to be a big catalyst for change in GroupM, and I guess aiming to reverse the decline in the agency market at the moment. So watch episode 59. We called it the year of change. I think it continues to surprise us every week, just the amount of transformation that's going on out there. But I think that's probably enough for this week. Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.